Nothing spoke, yet everything was seen. Welcome to Clue Law. I am your host, Vale. Tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. Your presence matters. Into the story. If you live in a brownstone where the front door has seen more liars than the county clerk's office, you develop a talent for sniffing trouble before it wipes its shoes. That Thursday, it didn't even bother. I was in the office at 10:20, doing the kind of work that keeps a private detective solvent and a private detective's boss irritable. Letters, receipts, a note to the florist about orchids that had the nerve to arrive with their petals pre-sulked. Fritz was in the kitchen conducting a campaign against hunger, and the house was settling into its usual rhythm, quiet enough to hear your thoughts, regulated enough to make your thoughts behave. Upstairs, Nero Wolfe was in the plant rooms with Theodore Horstman, practicing his one athletic exertion, supervising. If you've never watched Wolfe supervise orchids, you haven't seen a man at his most ruthless. He never touches a trowel, never lifts a pot, never bends, but he can make a grown horticulturist sweat just by pausing a half-second too long before saying no. At 10:21, the doorbell rang. I glanced at the clock because I knew, like a man knows his own pulse, that no one who loved his life rang Wolfe's bell while Wolfe was communing with orchids. I was halfway to the hall when I heard the voice from upstairs, rolling down the stairwell like a summons from a judge who assumes you're already guilty. "Archie." I stopped at the foot of the stairs and called up, "Yes, sir." "Attend." That was Wolfe. Forget the door. Observe. To decide whether I need to be disturbed, and try not to let anything with shoes into my house. The sacred sanctity of the brownstone is Wolfe's religion. Outsiders are tolerated only in the same way a man tolerates dust, by removing it. I opened the front door and got a face full of winter air and a man who looked like he'd been dug up rather than born. He was in his 40s, thick through the chest, with hair that had once been neat and was now merely resigned. His coat was respectable, but the cuffs were dark and the smell, faint but certain, was soil. Not perfume soil, not I bought a potted plant for my aunt soil. Real loam, the kind you get under your fingernails when you mean it. His eyes moved past me into the hall as if expecting an ambush. "Mr. Goodwin?" he said, and his voice had been taught to be polite and had learned cynicism on the side. "That's what they tell me. Who's asking?" He hesitated, as if names were dangerous. "Duncan Mayhew." I held the door open another inch out of courtesy to the weather. "Mr. Mayhew, appointment?" "I called. Your cook, Fritz, said—" "He says a lot of things," I told him. "What did he say in particular?" "That Mr. Wolfe doesn't see people in the morning, that I should come at 11, but—" He swallowed, and the swallow did not take. "I have to leave the city at noon." That would have been a reason to try a taxi stand or a confessional, not Nero Wolfe. Wolfe's schedule is arranged like the planets. You don't ask Jupiter to scoot over because you have a train. Still, there was something in Mayhew's stare. Tight, stubborn, not melodramatic, but afraid in a way that had taken an oath not to show. Afraid, but also angry that he was afraid. "Come in," I said, and stepped aside before he could argue with his own pride. He crossed the threshold like a man entering a courtroom. I closed the door behind him and watched him take in the hall, the hat stand, the polished wood, the calm that makes criminals itch. He had the decency to wipe his shoes on the mat. Trouble always has manners at first. I led him into the office, the one room in the house that strangers are allowed to occupy without a formal apology. The red leather chair for clients waited like a confession booth. He didn't sit. He stood near it as if sitting would be a commitment. "Mr. Wolfe isn't in," I lied. "He's occupied. So tell me what you want and I'll see whether it's worth interrupting." Mayhew gave me a look. "Interrupting him from what?" "From being Nero Wolfe," I said. "It's a full-time job." He almost smiled. Almost. Then the smile died the way a match dies in rain. "This isn't about murder," he said. "That's a relief," I told him. "We've been running low." He didn't laugh. He said, "It's about theft and about sabotage." I sat at my desk and reached for my pencil, not because I needed it, but because it gave my hands something to do besides betray interest. "Whose theft?" "My theft," he said. "Or my company's. It depends on who you think owns a thing when it's still unfinished." That sounded like a man trying to keep a secret while asking for help. It's hard to do without biting your tongue. "What's your company?" He hesitated again. "Galen and Mayhew." That name didn't clank like a national corporation, but it had the sound of a place that employs people who can spell invoice without assistance. I filed it away. "And what was stolen?" He exhaled through his nose. "A formula. Like chemistry. Like appetite," he said, and his eyes flicked quick toward the door as if the walls might have ears. "In Wolfe's house, they do." I leaned back. "You want a detective because someone stole a recipe?" He stiffened. "It is not a recipe." I nodded. "Sure, it's a formula." His jaw worked. He was the kind of man who had been polite all his life because it was part of his job, and now his politeness was strangling him. "It's a blend," he said. "Spices, extracts, ratios. I'm not a chemist, I'm—" He broke off, then started again with a different line, like a man switching tracks before a train hits him. "We have a client, a very large client, a chain. They want a signature product, something exclusive. We developed it. His hands opened and closed once. "Someone got into my office and copied the specification, not the finished product, the specification. And you know this because it was in a locked file," he said. "And now it's elsewhere." "Where is elsewhere?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice lowered, like he was trying to talk under the table. "In your house." My pencil stopped. "Try that again. Slower." His eyes didn't leave mine. "In this house, or it was. Yesterday." I let out a breath. That was new even for us. "We've had corpses on the rug, cops on the stairs, and in one unfortunate incident with a man who tried to smuggle a parrot through the front door. But a stolen commercial formula turning up in Wolfe's brownstone was like finding a pickpocket in a monastery." "Why would it be here?" I asked. "I didn't bring it," he said quickly. "I didn't even know. I've never been inside. I've only seen pictures in magazines, but—" He shut his eyes for a second as if it hurt to say the next part. "Because someone wants me to come here. Someone wants me to talk to Wolfe, to make him involved." That last word sounded like a curse. I set my pencil down carefully. "Mr. Mayhew, if you're trying to tell me you were framed, say so. It's faster." He flinched at framed, but didn't reject it. "I don't know what it is," he said. "I only know I received a note." "A note," I repeated. So because note is a small word that has ruined large lives. He reached inside his coat and produced an envelope. Plain. No return address. My name was typed, not written. Archie Goodwin. That alone was enough to make my skin itch. He held it out. I didn't take it yet. "When did you get this?" "Yesterday evening," he said. "At my apartment. Slipped under the door." "Open it." "I did," he said. I didn't understand it. Not at first. I took the envelope and pulled out a folded sheet. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind that feels like it thinks it's above ink. The message was typed. "Mr. Mayhew will call at the brownstone at 10:30 tomorrow morning. He will request employment. You will admit him. If you refuse, the contents of your spice cabinet will be redistributed." I read it twice, and then I read it a third time because the first two had been too ridiculous to be true. I looked up at Mayhew. "This is a joke." He shook his head. I don't think so. Why not? Because someone already redistributed something, he said. In my office. My file cabinet. I felt the edge of annoyance sharpening. Wolfe's spice cabinet, for one thing, is Fritz's domain, and Fritz regards it with reverence. The idea of someone tampering with it was like suggesting someone had spit in the chalice. Also, the note's tone was wrong. Not threatening in a loud way. Threatening in the way a man threatens to cut your tie while you're wearing it. I heard the step on the stairs, heavy, measured, the house itself making way. Wolfe appeared in the doorway of the office, filling it the way a cello fills a room. Large, dark, self-possessed. Till he wore his plant room outfit, yellow shirt, black trousers, and the expression of a man who has been forced to leave paradise because someone has knocked. His eyes took in Mayhew. Soil scent, tense posture, suit too tight at the shoulders, with a glance that would have made a lesser man confess to arson. "Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe said, "this is not 11. "No, sir," I said, "but it's aromatic." Wolfe's eyes moved to the note in my hand. "What is that?" "A summons," I said, and handed it over. He read it with that maddening calm of his, the calm that makes you want to slap a bell on him so you can tell when he's thinking. When he finished, his mouth tightened. Not anger, not fear, but distaste, like discovering a fly in the butter. He looked at Mayhew. "You are Mr. Mayhew." "Yes." "And you have complied with this impertinence." "I didn't know what else to do," Mayhew said. Wolfe held up a hand. "Stop. I am not interested in your dithering. Sit." The command landed on Mayhew like a shove. He sat stiffly in the red leather chair. Wolfe turned his eyes to me. "Archie, there is no redistribution of my spices." "I haven't checked," I said. "You will," Wolfe said, and his voice made "you will" sound like a law of physics. Then, to Mayhew, "State succinctly why you are here and why I should tolerate you." Mayhew swallowed again. This time the swallow worked. He said, "Someone stole a proprietary blend specification from my office. Someone wants to use it to ruin me. I believe that person intends to involve you." Wolfe's eyes narrowed a fraction. "Why?" "Because," Mayhew said, and his voice cracked slightly on the word. "The note says so. And because I'm told, people say, if Nero Wolfe is involved, the truth comes out." Wolfe's mouth twitched. It might have been amusement, but on Wolfe it looked like a knife being polished. "The truth," Wolfe said, "is a commodity. It is not always welcome." He returned to his chair behind his desk, his throne, and sat with the satisfaction of a man restoring order. He arranged his hands on his stomach. "Mr. Mayhew," Wolfe said, "your note is an insolence. It is also a presumption that my spices are vulnerable. I detest presumption." Mayhew said, "I didn't write it." "I assume you did not," Wolfe said. "I'm not a fool." That, from Wolfe, was practically a kiss. Wolfe leaned back. "Tell me the nature of this blend." Mayhew's eyes flicked to mine as if hoping I'd translate, and I didn't. "It's," he began, then stopped, and I saw the calculation on his face. How much can I say without ruining myself? A man in business measures words the way a miser measures coins. "It is for food," he said finally. "A seasoning, a signature profile. It would be valuable to a competitor." "Competitor," Wolfe repeated. "Name them." Mayhew hesitated. Wolfe's gaze hardened. "If you cannot name a competitor, you have no business asking my assistance." Mayhew said, "Galen." I blinked. "As in, Galen and Mayhew is—" "My partner," Mayhew said. "Lysander Galen. We founded it together." Wolfe's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Ah." That was Wolfe's way of saying, "Now we are in the realm of human folly, which is always more interesting than commerce." "Why do you suspect your partner?" Wolfe asked. I don't, Mayhew said quickly, then faltered. I don't want to, but he has been restless. He wants to sell. I want to expand. We argue, and now this happens. Wolfe nodded. Continue. Mayhew took a breath. The specification was in a locked file. Only 3 people have access. Me, Galen, and my assistant. Yesterday morning it was there. Yesterday afternoon it was gone. Not the file, the contents, the sheet. Copied, I believe, because there was no disturbance. Whoever did it knew how to do it without leaving traces. Traces are always left, Wolfe said. Only fools fail to see them. Mayhew's jaw tightened. Then I'm here because I'm apparently a fool. Wolfe ignored that. You mentioned your assistant. Clara Vane, Mayhew said. She's been with us 5 years. She's efficient, loyal. People use loyal as a substitute for I have never tested them, Wolfe said. So Mayhew flushed. She had no reason, Wolfe cut in. Reasons are abundant. What is scarce is opportunity. The note indicates someone has opportunity in this house. I said, I'll check the spice cabinet. Wolfe looked at me. You will also ascertain whether any file, note, or paper is missing, rearranged, or introduced. Yes, sir, he returned to Mayhew. Who else knew of this blend? Who else stood to profit from its theft? Mayhew's hands clenched in his lap. A client representative, a consultant, and... He stopped. And, Wolfe prompted. And my wife, Mayhew said quietly. That landed with the soft thud of personal stakes. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Your wife is involved in your business. She's involved in my life, Mayhew said, and there was a tired bitterness in it. Which has become the same thing. Wolfe regarded him for a long moment. Wolfe can make silence feel like an interrogation lamp. Mayhew shifted. I came, Mayhew said, because I received that note and because last night I got another message. Where? Wolfe asked. On my answering machine, Mayhew said. A voice, distorted. It said, if you want your blend back, bring your conscience to Wolfe. Wolfe's lips pressed together. Melodramatic. It scared me, Mayhew admitted. Not because of the blend, because of what it implies. They want me to confess to something or to accuse someone, to do it here. Wolfe's gaze went distant for a heartbeat, the look he gets when he is shifting pieces on his board. Then he said calmly, Mr. Mayhew, you will remain in this house until I permit you to leave. Mayhew's head snapped up. I told you, I have to leave at noon. Wolfe's voice was velvet over steel. No. Mayhew started to rise, indignation flaring. Wolfe said, if you leave, you will be ruined. Mayhew froze, half up, half down. How do you know that? Wolfe's eyes flicked to the note again, then to Mayhew, and the faintest hint of satisfaction appeared, the satisfaction of a man recognizing a pattern. Because, Wolfe said, the author of this note did not threaten you, he threatened me. The redistribution of my spices is an offense aimed at my dignity. That means the perpetrator expects me to react. If I do not react, he will create a condition that will compel my reaction. You are bait. Mayhew sank back into the chair like a man realizing he has been holding a grenade. I felt my own irritation shift into something colder. When somebody had written that note believing they understood Nero Wolfe. That was either the stupidest thing I'd ever heard or the most dangerous. Wolfe looked at me. Archie. Summon Mr. Mayhew's assistant, his partner, his client representative, and his consultant. Today. With what? Telepathy? I asked. Wolfe's eyes did not soften. With the telephone. I gave him a look. You want a parade through the brownstone? I want a circle, Wolfe said. A circle closes. Mayhew stammered. You can't just call them... Wolfe's voice snapped, not loud, but decisive. I can do as I please in my house. If they refuse, we will compel them by other means. Mr. Panzer may assist. Mr. Kramer may be required. When Wolfe mentions Saul Panzer and Inspector Kramer in the same breath, it means he's not playing. Mayhew said, "I don't understand. So you're taking this case?" Wolfe looked at him as if the question were almost insulting. "Someone has presumed to manipulate me by threatening my kitchen and my household. That is intolerable." I said, "So we're doing this because of paprika?" Wolfe's eyes slid to me. Not paprika. Principle. And there it was. The reason he wouldn't explain at first because he didn't need to. Wolfe will ignore a murder if it doesn't interest him, but he will go to war over an intrusion in his domain. I stood. All right, I'll check the spice cabinet, check for foreign notes, and then start dialing in the circus. Wolfe said, "Proceed." I left the office with Mayhew sitting rigidly in the red chair, looking like a man who had stepped into a trap and was waiting to hear it click. In the kitchen, Fritz was humming softly, in which is his way of blessing the world. The spice cabinet was to the right, a neat array of labeled jars, tins and bottles in an order so pleasing it could make you weep. I opened it. Nothing exploded, which was encouraging. Everything looked normal. Then I noticed it. The smallest thing, the kind of thing only a man who lives with Nero Wolfe and a Swiss cook would catch. One jar, third row, had been turned so its label faced slightly left instead of dead center. It was a jar of marjoram. I touched it. The lid was tight. I lifted it. The jar was heavier than it had any business being. I looked at Fritz. His humming stopped. "What is it, Archie?" he asked, his voice gentle but alert. I said, "Either your marjoram has taken up weightlifting, or somebody put something in Wolfe's cabinet." Fritz's face went pale in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with outrage. "That," he said softly, "is impossible." "Yeah," I said. "That's what worries me." I carried the jar back to the office like it was a live coal. Wolfe looked up as I entered, and the expression on his face told me he'd already decided the answer before I spoke. I set the jar on his desk. Wolfe stared at it for a long moment, as if it were a specimen under glass. Then he said, with the calm of a man announcing the weather, "The brownstone has been disturbed." I nodded. "By someone with a sense of humor and access." Wolfe's eyes fixed on the jar of marjoram, the jar that watched in silence, and his voice dropped, precise and cold. "Archie," he said, "we will now discover who believes he may touch what is mine." Wolfe did not touch the jar. He never does when the object in question has announced itself as a provocation. He leaned back, fingers steepled, eyes half-lidded, and regarded the marjoram as if it might confess out of embarrassment. "Archie," he said, "open it." "That's what I was afraid you'd say." I twisted the lid. It came off without resistance. Inside the jar, snugged between the glass and the dried leaves, was a folded sheet of paper wrapped in waxed tissue. The marjoram itself had been carefully replaced, tamped down like evidence after a crime. I extracted the packet and unfolded it. Typed again. Same machine, same confident spacing. "The sanctity of your kitchen is intact. Consider this a demonstration, not a violation. The specification you seek is secure, and so is the truth." I handed the note to Wolfe. Mayhew had leaned forward, eyes fixed on my hands like a gambler watching cards. Wolfe read the message once. Then again. When he finished, he placed it neatly on his desk beside the jar. "Demonstration," Wolfe said. A vulgar word. Mayhew said hoarsely, "That's it. That's the same typeface. The same tone." Wolfe nodded. "Our author wishes to be admired for his cleverness. That is always a weakness." I said, "Also means whoever it is has been in the kitchen long enough to do a tidy job. Fritz doesn't let strangers wander." Wolfe's eyes flicked to the doorway. "Indeed. Fritz?" Fritz had entered silently and now stood with his hands folded, looking at the jar as if it had personally insulted him. "Who has been in the kitchen in the last 48 hours?" Wolfe asked. Fritz did not hesitate. "That's the delivery man from Bittner's, the milkman, Mr. Goodwin, of course, Mr. Wolfe, and—" his mouth tightened, "Miss Clara Vane." Mayhew jerked. "Clara, she's been here." "She brought a basket," Fritz said stiffly. "A gift, for Mr. Wolfe, from Galen and Mayhew, artisanal preserves." I stared. "That explains the smell of quince." Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. "When?" "Yesterday afternoon, at 3, Fritz said. "She did not enter the kitchen. She waited in the hall. I accepted the basket." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Did you place the basket in the kitchen?" "Yes." "And you were present at all times?" Fritz hesitated. "Just a fraction. Enough." "I stepped away," he said, "for 1 minute." The telephone rang. Mayhew put his face in his hands. "Clara wouldn't—" Wolfe raised a finger. "Restraint, Mr. Mayhew. We are not yet accusing." I said, 1 minute is enough time if you know what you're doing." Wolfe nodded. "And if you have rehearsed?" Mayhew said, "She's efficient, not criminal." Wolfe regarded him. "Efficiency is morally neutral." He turned to me. "Archie, where is the basket?" "In the pantry. Empty." "Retrieve it." I did. The basket was wicker, tasteful, with a bow that had been retied. Nothing hidden now, but the lining had been disturbed. I brought it back. Wolfe examined it with his eyes only. The marjoram jar was selected deliberately. It is seldom used. That suggests familiarity with my kitchen habits. Fritz bristled. "No one but—" Wolfe cut him off gently. "Not familiarity through intimacy, Fritz. Through observation." I said, "Clara Vane has been in the office plenty of times. She's seen the routines." Mayhew shook his head. "She wouldn't risk this." "Risk is relative," Wolfe said. "What does she gain?" Mayhew opened his mouth, closed it, then said quietly, "Security. She's been worried about the company, about Galen wanting to sell." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Ah, Mr. Galen wishes to sell." "Yes," Mayhew said. "He thinks the offer is generous. I think it's premature." "To whom?" Wolfe asked. "Halcyon Foods," Mayhew said. "A chain. They're the client for the blend." Wolfe leaned back. "So the client is also a potential buyer. Convenient. And they have a representative," I said. "Name?" "Ruth Calder," Mayhew said. "She's attentive." Wolfe murmured, "Another opportunity vector." I said, "And the consultant?" "Marcus Eisenman," Mayhew said. "Brand strategy. He helped us position the product." Wolfe nodded. 4 names: partner, assistant, client representative, consultant, and a wife. Mayhew stiffened. "Elena has nothing to do with—" Wolfe waved it away. "Spouses always have something to do with everything." There was a pause. The house seemed to listen. Wolfe said, "Archie, make the calls. Invite them here this afternoon. Stagger the times. Begin with Miss Vane. And if they refuse?" "They will not," Wolfe said. "You will be persuasive." I grinned. I usually am. I started for the phone, then stopped. "One thing. The note says the specification is secure. Not returned. Secure. Meaning leverage," Wolfe said. "Meaning it will be produced at the moment of maximum effect." Mayhew's voice was tight. "What moment is that?" Wolfe looked at him. "When all relevant consciences are present." I made the first call. Clara Vane answered on the second ring, voice crisp, controlled. I introduced myself. I invoked Wolfe's name and watched Mayhew's face as I spoke. There was a pause on the line. Then Clara said, "Of course, I'll come immediately." No protest, no surprise. Wolfe's eyebrow lifted. Next was Lysander Galen. He was warmer, smoother, amused by the invitation. Nero Wolfe, that's theatrical. I'll be there. Ruth Calder took longer. She asked questions. I gave her none. She agreed reluctantly. Marcus Iseman didn't answer. I left a message. This is Archie Goodwin. Mr. Wolfe would like a word. Today. When I hung up, Wolfe said, Good, now we wait. Mayhew stood. You're just waiting. Yes, Wolfe said. Impatience is for those without control. Mayhew laughed once, sharp. Someone put a note in your spice cabinet. Wolfe's eyes were cold, and as thereby surrendered initiative. There was a knock. Not the doorbell. A knock, and I went to the door. Clara Vane stood there, composed, gloved, eyes bright with something like resolve. She stepped inside and took in the hall with professional appreciation. Mr. Goodwin, she said. Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe did not rise. Miss Vane? Sit. She did. Her gaze flicked to Mayhew. Duncan. He didn't answer. Wolfe said, You brought a basket to my house yesterday. Yes, Clara said. A courtesy. You were alone with it. No, she said. The cook was present. For most of the time, Wolfe said. She hesitated. Just a hair. Enough. Wolfe continued. You've been anxious about the future of Galen and Mayhew. Yes, you are loyal. Her mouth tightened. I am practical. Wolfe nodded. You know my habits. You know my kitchen is sacrosanct. You knew that a violation, even a symbolic one, would compel my attention. Clara's eyes met his. I knew you valued order. Did you place a note in my spice cabinet? Wolfe asked. Silence. Thick. Mayhew stared at her, pleading without words. Clara said, No. Wolfe accepted it without comment. Did you know someone else would? Her breath caught. Just once. Wolfe leaned forward. Miss Vane, the next answer you give will determine whether you are an accessory or a witness. She looked at Mayhew, then at me, then back at Wolfe. I knew, she said softly, that something was going to happen. Wolfe nodded, as if a door had opened exactly where he expected it. Good, he said. Then we are making progress. From the hall came another sound, the door opening again. Another arrival. The circle was beginning to close. The sound from the hall resolved itself into measured footsteps and a voice pitched deliberately loud, the kind that announces confidence before it earns it. Well, the voice said, this place hasn't changed. I went to the doorway as Lysander Galen came in, coat immaculate, smile affixed like it had been practiced in a mirror with good lighting. He was tall, spare, and groomed to the inch. A man who looked like he sold ideas more than products. His eyes moved quickly, taking inventory. Wolfe in his chair, Mayhew stiff and pale, Clara composed but tight, the jar of marjoram on the desk. Well, Duncan, Galen said lightly, you look as if you've swallowed a bad olive. Mayhew didn't rise. Lysander. Galen turned to Wolfe and extended a hand that Wolfe ignored with serene precision. Mr. Wolfe, an honor. I must say, when Archie called, I thought this was a joke. Wolfe said, Sit down, Mr. Galen. Galen's smile thinned, but he sat, crossing his legs with ease. All right, I'm seated. Now perhaps you'll tell me why I've been summoned like a delinquent schoolboy. Wolfe gestured faintly toward the desk. A document has been stolen from your company. Galen's eyebrows rose. Stolen? That's a strong word. Copied, then concealed, Wolfe said. The distinction is immaterial. Galen glanced at Mayhew. Duncan? Mayhew's voice was flat. The blend specification is missing. Galen leaned back. I thought we agreed it was being revised. We agreed no such thing, Mayhew snapped. Clara flinched. Wolfe watched them with the mild interest of a man observing insects rearrange themselves under glass. Mr. Galen, Wolfe said, you wish to sell your company. I wish to realize its value, Galen said smoothly. There's a difference. Indeed, Wolfe said. And Halcyon Foods wishes to buy. Potentially, Galen said, if terms are right. Wolfe nodded. And a proprietary blend would increase valuation. Or complicate negotiations, Galen said. Exclusivity cuts both ways. Wolfe did not argue. Did you authorize anyone to copy the specification? No. Did you do so yourself? Galen laughed softly. If I had, I wouldn't be sitting here. Wolfe's eyes flicked to Clara. Miss Vane? She said, no. Wolfe inclined his head, as if tallying marks on a page only he could see. The doorbell rang again, sharp and insistent this time. I answered it to Ruth Calder, coat collar turned up, expression irritated by inconvenience rather than fear. So she stepped inside like a woman entering a negotiation she didn't ask for. Mr. Goodwin, she said, I don't appreciate ambushes. Then you're in the right house, I told her. We specialize. She took in the office with a quick glance and then fixed her eyes on Wolfe. Mr. Wolfe, I was told this concerns Halcyon. It concerns truth, Wolfe said. Sit. She did, stiff-backed. Wolfe wasted no time. Ms. Calder, you are aware of a proprietary blend developed by Galen and Mayhew. Yes, she said, as part of a potential partnership. You have seen a draft specification? Yes. Did you copy it? No. Did you request a copy? No. Did you suggest it would be advantageous for Halcyon to possess it prior to acquisition? Her lips pressed together. I suggested transparency. Wolfe nodded. Transparency is often opaque. Ruth Calder's eyes narrowed. If you're implying corporate espionage. I imply nothing, Wolfe said. I deduce. The phone on Wolfe's desk rang. I picked it up, listened, and covered the receiver. Marcus Iserman, I said. He's downstairs. Says he was in a meeting. Admit him, Wolfe said. I did. Iserman came in looking like a man who'd been interrupted mid-pitch. Tie slightly loose, energy restless, eyes bright with calculation. He smiled too quickly. Archie. Mr. Wolfe, this is, quite the gathering. Wolfe regarded him. Sit, Mr. Iserman. Iserman complied, glancing around. Have I missed something? Only your opportunity to remain uninvolved, Wolfe said. Iserman chuckled uncertainly. I'm a consultant. I advise. I don't steal. Consultants, Wolfe said, and often advise themselves first. The room settled into a tense stillness. 5 people, each aware that the walls were closer than they looked. Wolfe folded his hands. One of you placed a note in my spice cabinet. Ruth Calder blinked. Your what? Galen laughed outright. This is absurd. It is precise, Wolfe said. The jar of marjoram was selected because it is seldom used. The note was concealed with care. The act was not vandalism, but demonstration. Iserman leaned forward. Demonstration of what? Access, Wolfe said, and confidence. Clara's voice was quiet. I told you. I didn't do it. I believe you, Wolfe said. Mayhew looked at him sharply. You do? Yes, Wolfe said, because the act required not only opportunity, but audacity. You lack the latter. Clara's shoulders sagged just a fraction. Wolfe continued. The note's author wished to force my involvement, to compel me to gather you all here. Galen frowned. Why? Because, Wolfe said, the theft alone was insufficient. The thief required judgment. Mine. Ruth Calder said coldly, We didn't ask for your judgment. No, Wolfe said. You assumed it. Iserman's smile had faded. Let's be clear. If someone copied a spec, that's an internal matter. Wolfe's eyes pinned him. You suggested to Mr. Mayhew that the blend was undervalued without broader exposure. Iserman stiffened. You suggested, Wolfe went on, that a controlled leak might clarify interest. Silence fell like a dropped glass. Mayhew said, "Marcus." Isman spread his hands. "It was theoretical." "Did you copy the specification?" Wolfe asked. "No." "Did you know it would be copied?" Isman hesitated. I suspected." Wolfe nodded. "And you knew how to provoke me?" Isman's eyes flicked to the jar. "I know your reputation." "Reputation," Wolfe said, "is not intimacy." He turned his gaze to Ruth Calder. "Ms. Calder, you authorized a junior associate to request documentation from Miss Vane." Ruth stiffened. "I did no such—" "Under the guise of due diligence," Wolfe finished. "Miss Vane declined." Clara nodded. "I did." Wolfe turned to Galen. "You then suggested to Mr. Eisenman that an anonymous demonstration might accelerate matters." Galen's face hardened. "You're guessing." "No," Wolfe said. "I'm reconstructing." Galen leaned forward. "Even if that were true, it doesn't explain how the spec was concealed," Wolfe said. "Because it was never removed from the building where it was copied." Mayhew's breath caught. "What building?" Wolfe looked at him. "Yours." The room went very quiet. Wolfe said, "The specification was copied during business hours by someone with routine access. It was then hidden, not taken to be produced later. The spice cabinet note was a lure, not a container. The true concealment is elsewhere." I said, "In Mayhew's office." Wolfe nodded. "In plain sight." Mayhew said hoarsely, "Where?" Wolfe leaned back, satisfied now, like a man settling in before dessert. "In the file you believe is intact," he said, "the one labeled Final." Galen's eyes widened. Ruth Calder swore under her breath. Iserman closed his eyes. Wolfe's voice was calm, inexorable. Mr. Iserman advised. Mr. Galen consented. Miss Calder anticipated benefit, but none of you executed. He looked at Mayhew's wife's empty chair, metaphorical but heavy. "That's because," Wolfe said, "the execution required someone who would not be suspected, someone who believed she was protecting stability." Clara looked up sharply. Wolfe met her gaze. "You hid the copy, Miss Vane. Not to sell it, but to control it." Her composure finally broke. "I was trying to save us." Wolfe nodded once. "Intent does not absolve method." Outside, somewhere in the city, a siren wailed. Inside the brownstone, the garden watched in silence, and the circle had nearly closed. Clara did not cry. She did not collapse or beg or fling accusations like a cornered animal. She sat very straight, hands folded, eyes fixed on a spot just beyond Wolfe's left shoulder, as if staring directly at him would complete something she was not ready to finish. Mayhew was the one who broke. "Clara," he said, and there was real pain in it now, stripped of partnership and professionalism. "Tell me he's wrong." She swallowed. "He's not." The words settled heavily. Ruth Calder exhaled, sharp and irritated, like someone realizing a contract clause had teeth. Galen stared at Clara with a look that slid from surprise into calculation. Iserman looked as if he were already revising his resume. Wolfe remained still. "You copied the specification," Wolfe said, not accusing, merely stating. "You concealed it within the same file cabinet. You relied on the assumption that no one suspects what appears undisturbed?" Clara nodded once. "I replaced the original exactly. The copy is folded inside the backing of the folder. Glued. You wouldn't notice unless you knew to look." "I knew," Wolfe said. She let out a breath. "I didn't plan the note. That was Lysander's idea." Galen stiffened. Now wait." Wolfe silenced him with a raised finger. "You suggested the provocation. You did not execute it." Galen's mouth tightened. "I didn't think she'd actually—" "You thought she would act," Wolfe said, "because she is efficient." Clara's voice was steady again. I did it because I believed the company was about to be sold out from under us. I wanted leverage. Time. Mayhew said, "You stole from me." "I protected you," she said, "from being rushed, from being cornered." Wolfe observed, "Protection that requires deception is seldom protection. It is possession." Clara flinched. Ruth Calder crossed her arms. "This is absurd. If the document is still on site, then nothing was stolen." "On the contrary," Wolfe said. "Trust was stolen, and my kitchen was used as a stage." Ruth's lips thinned. "You're dramatizing?" "No," Wolfe said, "so I'm offended." That landed harder than any threat. I said, "So what now?" Wolfe turned his gaze to me. "Now we retrieve the copy." He looked at Clara. "You will accompany Mr. Goodwin to your office and remove it." Her eyes widened. "You're letting me?" "I am supervising," Wolfe said. "Physically unnecessary, logically complete." Mayhew stood. "I'm coming." "No," Wolfe said. "You will remain here." Mayhew's jaw tightened, but he sat. Ruth Calder rose. "This is internal. Halcyon doesn't need—" Wolfe's voice cut like wire. "Halcyon will wait." She hesitated, then sat back down, furious. I grabbed my coat. Clara rose smoothly, already resigned. As we moved toward the door, I glanced back. Wolfe had leaned back into his chair, eyes closed, as if the matter were already resolved. For him, it was. The ride downtown was quiet. Clara stared out the window, city sliding past like an afterthought. "I didn't want it to end like this," she said finally. "Things that start crooked usually do," I said. At the office, she unlocked the file cabinet, withdrew the folder labeled Final, and peeled back the interior lining with practiced care. The folded sheet came free easily, like it had been waiting. She handed it to me. "There, untouched." "Not untouched," I said. "Just patient." We returned to the brownstone less than an hour later. Wolfe had not moved. Mayhew looked up as we entered, hope and dread warring in his face. I placed the document on Wolfe's desk. Wolfe opened it, scanned it, then closed it and slid it back. "Mr. Mayhew," Wolfe said, "your property is restored." Mayhew let out a breath that sounded like something leaving him for good. "Thank you." Wolfe inclined his head slightly. "Do not thank me yet." He turned to Clara. "You will resign." She nodded. "I know." "You will also provide a written account of your actions," Wolfe continued. "Mr. Kramer will receive it." Galen sputtered. "Police? This doesn't need—" "It does," Wolfe said, "because my house was violated." That ended discussion. Wolfe turned to Ruth Calder. "Halcyon will suspend negotiations until internal governance is clarified." Ruth bristled. "You have no authority." "I have information," Wolfe said. "And a telephone." She stood abruptly. "We'll be in touch." Wolfe did not respond. Isaman shifted. "I suppose my services are no longer required." "On the contrary," Wolfe said. "You will bill for today." Isaman blinked. "I will?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "As a reminder of the cost of cleverness." Isaman nodded slowly. "Understood." One by one, they left. Galen last, his confidence finally cracked, giving Mayhew a look that promised future battles. Clara paused at the door, glanced back at Wolfe. "I never meant to involve you," she said. "You did not," Wolfe replied. "You were used." She nodded once and was gone. The house settled. Fritz entered quietly, already restoring order in his mind. Wolfe closed his eyes. "Dinner," he said. I leaned back, exhausted and oddly satisfied. All this over a seasoning blend. Wolfe opened one eye. "No, over presumption." I grinned. "Same spice, different jar." He ignored me. Outside, the garden remained silent. keeping its counsel, as gardens do when men finish revealing theirs. Dinner did not arrive immediately, so which in Wolfe's house is the clearest signal that a matter is not quite concluded. Fritz moved with careful purpose in the kitchen, the clink of utensils subdued, as if even the copper pans were being asked to keep secrets. Wolfe sat with his eyes closed, hands folded, breathing slow. He looked like a man digesting not food but implications. I broke the silence because that's my job. "You're not done." Wolfe opened one eye. "Astute. Something's still bothering you." "Yes," Wolfe said. "The demonstration." I frowned. Clara admitted hiding the copy. Galen admitted suggesting the note. "That's your chain." "Not entirely," Wolfe said. "The note in my spice cabinet was placed with deliberation but also with restraint. It did not contaminate. It did not threaten destruction. It promised order." "So?" "So," Wolfe said, "that its author wished me to understand him." I rolled that around. "Galen wanted to provoke you. Why does that bug you?" "Because," Wolfe said, "he lacks the discipline." That was interesting. "Meaning?" "Galen is impulsive," Wolfe said. "Vain. He would have enjoyed spectacle. The note was austere." I leaned forward. "You think someone else wrote it?" "I think," Wolfe said, "someone refined it." As if summoned by the thought, the doorbell rang again. I answered it to Inspector Kramer, hat askew, face already set in its "don't start with me" lines. "Goodwin," he grunted. "You done playing kitchen games?" "Come in, Inspector," I said. "We've been expecting you." He stomped in, took one look at Wolfe, and snorted. "Of course." Wolfe did not open his eyes. "Inspector." Kramer planted himself in the chair Galen had vacated. "Now I got a call about a stolen document, corporate nonsense, and something about spices." Wolfe opened both eyes now. "You were summoned because my household was violated." Kramer waved a hand. "You always say that." "And you always listen," Wolfe replied. Kramer grunted again. "All right, talk." Wolfe summarized with surgical economy. Kramer listened, chewing on it, eyes flicking to me occasionally to confirm I wasn't exaggerating. When Wolfe finished, Kramer leaned back. "So the paper never left the building," he said. "No harm, no foul." "Incorrect," Wolfe said. "The harm was potential. The foul was presumption." Kramer sighed. "You want charges?" "I want clarity," Wolfe said. "And restraint." Kramer looked at me. "Translation. He wants to scare them straight without paperwork," I said. Wolfe did not contradict me. Kramer said, Clara Vane confessed?" "She will provide a statement," Wolfe said. "As an accessory, not a mastermind." Kramer raised an eyebrow. "And the mastermind?" Wolfe smiled faintly. "You have not asked the correct question." Kramer scowled. "Which is?" "Who ensured," Wolfe said, "that the document would be recoverable?" Kramer frowned. "The assistant hid it." "Yes," Wolfe said. "At whose suggestion?" Kramer's gaze sharpened. "You said Galen suggested the note." "The note," Wolfe said, "not the concealment." Kramer leaned forward. "You think someone planned both sides?" "I think," Wolfe said, "someone wanted leverage without loss. Someone who anticipated my involvement and wished to control the outcome." Kramer's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Wolfe did not answer immediately. He never does when the answer is still arranging itself. The phone rang, and I answered. Saul Panzer's voice came through, low and efficient. "Archie, you were right. Halcyon's internal emails, public-facing ones, don't mention the blend. But there's chatter from a private consultancy account. Guess who?" I smiled. "Marcus Eiserman." "Yes," Saul said. "He's been positioning himself as a neutral facilitator, advising Galen, nudging Calder, reassuring the assistant, and he drafted a sample, anonymous communication last month for a different client. Same phrasing, Same rhythm. I glanced at Wolfe. He was listening, eyes intent. Thanks, Saul, I said. That'll do. I hung up and relayed it. Kramer let out a low whistle. Consultant playing puppet master. Wolfe nodded. Mr. Easeman refined the provocation. He did not place the note himself, but he composed it. Kramer said, That's thin. It is sufficient, Wolfe said. It's because he billed for it. Kramer stared. He what? I instructed him to bill, Wolfe said calmly. He will itemize. Kramer laughed despite himself. You're going to nail him with an invoice. Agreed, Wolfe said. Leaves paperwork. Kramer stood. All right, I'll have a word with him. No charges yet. Wolfe inclined his head. Thank you. Kramer paused at the door. You know, one of these days, someone's going to really wreck your kitchen. Wolfe's eyes hardened. They will regret it. Kramer left. The house exhaled again. Fritz appeared. Dinner is served. We ate. Wolfe approved the sauce, which is the highest praise he gives anything. I chewed and waited. Afterward, Wolfe spoke, almost to himself. The garden watches in silence because it understands patience. Men do not. I grinned. That going on a plaque? No, Wolfe said. On a bill. I leaned back, content. Outside, the brownstone settled into its proper quiet, and somewhere a consultant was about to learn that cleverness, like marjoram, is best used sparingly. The next morning arrived the way mornings in the brownstone always do, quietly, with the sense that the house had already decided how the day should behave. I was at my desk, pretending to work while actually replaying the last 48 hours in my head, when Wolfe's bell rang. Not the urgent one. The civilized one. The come up here because I am ready to be impressive bell. I went upstairs. Wolfe was seated behind his desk, immaculate as ever, the world arranged neatly around him. On the corner of the desk lay a single sheet of paper and an envelope. Fritz stood near the door, hands folded, expression serene again. The kitchen restored. The universe back in alignment. Archie, Wolfe said. Sit. I did. We expecting company? No, Wolfe said. We are concluding. That was my cue. He slid the paper toward me. It was an invoice. Marcus Eiserman's letterhead. Consulting services rendered. Itemized. One line stood out. Strategic communication, drafting. Anonymous provocation. I whistled softly. He really did bill for it. Yes, Wolfe said. Arrogance and habit. He assumed the transaction would dissolve into abstraction. And instead it became evidence. Precisely. I leaned back. Kramer arrest him? No, Wolfe said. He confronted him. And Mr. Eisman elected cooperation over spectacle. He will provide testimony should it be required. Halcyon has severed ties. His reputation will survive, but it will limp. I grinned. So you clipped his wings with a fountain pen. Wolfe's mouth twitched. I prefer clean instruments. I glanced at the envelope. And that? Wolfe's eyes hardened slightly. That is restitution. I opened it. Inside was a cashier's check made out to Nero Wolfe. The amount was not small. From Galen and Mayhew, I said. Yes, Wolfe replied. Mr. Mayhew insisted. For what? I asked. Emotional distress? For presumption, Wolfe said. And for the insult to my household. I nodded. You cashing it? No. He rang the bell. Fritz entered. Fritz, Wolfe said, this sum will be donated to the Horticultural Society. In your name. Fritz's eyes widened. In mine. You endured disturbance, Wolfe said. Justice must be balanced. Fritz bowed slightly, deeply moved. Thank you, Herr Wolfe. When Fritz left, I said, You're feeling generous. No, Wolfe said. I'm feeling finished. I waited. Wolfe doesn't rush conclusions. He lets them arrive fully dressed. Clara Vane, Wolfe said at last, will not be charged. I raised an eyebrow. Kramer agreed? He did, Wolfe said. Her statement demonstrated intent without malice. Mr. Mayhew has elected not to press. Saintly, I said. Pragmatic, Wolfe corrected. He requires stability more than retribution. And Galen? Wolfe's expression cooled. Mr. Galen will sell his shares. To Halcyon? No, Wolfe said. To Mr. Mayhew. That surprised me. He can afford that. He can now, Wolfe said. The blend will be released on schedule. Halcyon will license, not acquire. Mr. Mayhew will retain control. I leaned forward. You nudged that. I clarified options, Wolfe said. Nay, men often mistake pressure for inevitability. And the wife? I asked. You never mentioned her again. Wolfe regarded me. Mrs. Mayhew knew nothing. Her relevance was emotional, not factual. So you used her as misdirection? Yes, Wolfe said calmly. It was effective. I laughed. Cold. Efficient, Wolfe said. There was a pause. The comfortable kind. I said, you know, all of this could have stayed internal. No note, no kitchen drama, no Wolfe. Yes, Wolfe said. And then the wrong man would have won. That matters to you. It does, Wolfe said. Because the wrong man believed he could control outcomes without accountability. And because he touched your spices. That, Wolfe said, was merely discourteous. I stood. Anything else? Yes, Wolfe said. One final task. I waited. You will telephone Mr. Mayhew, Wolfe said, and advise him that if he ever again permits ambition to masquerade as cleverness, I will not be so patient. I smiled. Friendly warning. Firm, Wolfe said. I made the call. Mayhew was grateful, shaken, relieved. He promised vigilance. He promised respect. Men always do after surviving proximity to Wolfe. When I hung up, Wolfe had closed his eyes. Dinner? I asked. Yes, Wolfe said. Fritz has prepared something restorative. I headed downstairs, the case neatly folded away behind me. Outside, the city carried on, full of people rearranging jars they didn't own and assuming silence meant ignorance. Later, after dinner, Wolfe spoke again, more reflective than usual. Archie, he said, people often believe strategy is movement. Isn't it? No, Wolfe said. It is position. The garden does not chase the gardener, and it waits. I grinned. And watches. Yes, Wolfe said. In silence. I poured myself a drink, the brownstone warm and orderly again, and thought about how close cleverness always comes to arrogance, and how easily a man can mistake access for ownership. In the end, no one died. Nothing burned. No headline screamed. Just a jar of marjoram returned to its place, knowing exactly what it had seen and exactly when to keep quiet.